The rain tapped softly against the windows of the small animal shelter on the edge of Cedar Ridge, Colorado. It was one of those gray Saturday mornings that made the whole town seem quieter than usual. Inside, the familiar sounds of barking puppies, mewing kittens, and volunteers chatting filled the building with life. But in the very last kennel, where the lights seemed a little dimmer, lay an old golden retriever named Rusty. Rusty barely lifted his head when visitors walked by. Years ago, he would have rushed to the front of his kennel, wagging his tail so hard his whole body shook. Back then, families always stopped to pet him. Not anymore. His muzzle had turned almost completely white. Arthritis made standing painful. One ear drooped from an old injury, and cataracts clouded one of his gentle brown eyes. A small sign hung above his kennel. Age 12 years old. Good with children. Needs a quiet home. Underneath, someone had written in blue marker, waiting for 18 days. Most people never even finished reading the sign. Children tugged their parents toward fluffy puppies instead. Teenagers laughed over energetic huskies. Couples admired playful Labrador puppies. Rusty simply watched them pass. Shelter manager Linda Harper sighed as she walked over carrying breakfast. "Morning, old friend." Rusty slowly stood despite the stiffness in his legs. His tail wagged exactly 3 times. Never 4. Always 3. Linda smiled sadly. "You still believe someone's coming?" She scratched behind his ears. "You've got more hope than the rest of us." Across town, 7-year-old Noah Carter sat silently in the back seat of his mother's aging Honda. His backpack rested beside him. His baseball glove lay untouched. Normally, Noah talked nonstop. He asked questions about clouds, about birds, about dinosaurs, about why French fries tasted different from restaurant to restaurant. Today, nothing. His mother, Emily, glanced into the rearview mirror. "You okay, buddy?" Noah shrugged. "I'm fine." But he wasn't. Not even close. Only 4 months earlier, Noah's father, Daniel, had passed away after suffering a sudden heart attack while coaching Noah's Little League team. One moment he was laughing. The next, everything changed. Since then, Noah barely smiled. He stopped playing baseball. He stopped inviting friends over. Sometimes Emily found him sitting in Daniel's old recliner, holding his father's baseball cap without saying a word. Grief looked different on children. Some cried, some screamed. Noah simply became quiet. Too quiet. Emily had tried everything. Counseling, family game nights, camping trips, even surprise visits from relatives. Nothing reached the lonely place inside her son. Then Noah's therapist suggested something unexpected. Maybe he needs someone who understands unconditional love. A dog? Not just any dog, the therapist replied. Sometimes older shelter dogs heal broken hearts better than anyone else. That Saturday, Emily finally decided to try. "We're just looking," she reminded Noah as they parked outside Cedar Ridge Animal Rescue. No promises. Noah nodded without enthusiasm. "Okay." Inside, volunteers greeted them warmly. "Looking for a puppy?" one volunteer asked. Emily smiled politely. "We're just visiting." The volunteer pointed toward the puppy room. "They're this way." But Noah didn't move. Instead, he wandered in the opposite direction, past the noisy kennels, past the excited barking, past the jumping puppies desperate for attention. Something had caught his eye. At the end of the hallway, one dog wasn't barking. He wasn't jumping. He wasn't begging. He simply lay quietly watching everyone pass by. Rusty, the old golden retriever, slowly raised his head. For a long moment, neither moved. The shelter suddenly felt strangely quiet, almost as if the rest of the world had disappeared. Noah walked closer. Rusty remained perfectly still. Finally, the old dog's tail wagged. Once, twice, 3 times. Exactly 3. Noah knelt beside the kennel. "Hi." Rusty's cloudy eyes softened. He carefully walked forward, each step slow but determined. When he reached the gate, he gently rested his head against the metal bars. No barking, no whining, just trust, Linda noticed from across the room. Her eyes widened. "That's odd." Emily looked over. What is? He hasn't walked to greet anyone in almost 3 weeks. Noah slipped one finger through the bars. Rusty gently licked it. Just once, Noah smiled. It was tiny, barely noticeable, but it was the first real smile Emily had seen in months. Tears instantly filled her eyes. Linda whispered softly, I haven't seen him do that with anyone. Emily opened the kennel door. Rusty slowly stepped out. Instead of exploring the room, he walked directly to Noah. Then, with surprising care, the old dog leaned against the little boy's shoulder. As if he already knew, Noah wrapped both arms around Rusty's neck. For nearly a minute, neither moved. Noah buried his face into the old dog's soft fur. Then, in a voice so quiet only Rusty could hear, he whispered, I miss my dad. Rusty didn't move away. He simply stayed there, steady, patient, present. A single tear rolled down Noah's cheek and disappeared into Rusty's golden coat. Linda quietly turned away to give them privacy. Emily covered her mouth, struggling not to cry. Because for the first time since Daniel died, her son wasn't hiding his pain. He was sharing it with an old shelter dog that nobody else wanted. Neither Noah nor Rusty knew it yet. But that quiet moment inside an almost forgotten kennel was about to change not only their lives, it was about to inspire an entire community. For nearly 20 minutes, Noah sat on the floor beside Rusty. He didn't ask for toys. He didn't ask to see the puppies. He simply rested against the old dog's warm body. Rusty sighed contentedly, as if a weight he had carried for years had finally become lighter. Emily watched from a nearby bench. It had been months since she'd seen peace on her son's face. Linda walked over quietly. I've worked here for 14 years, she whispered. I've never seen Rusty connect with someone this quickly. Emily smiled through tears. It feels like they already know each other. Linda nodded. Sometimes the animals choose us before we choose them. Linda sat beside Emily and began telling Rusty's story. He wasn't always a shelter dog. Emily looked surprised. What happened? Linda glanced toward Rusty. 12 years ago, he belonged to a firefighter named Jack Sullivan. Jack lived alone after losing his wife to cancer. Rusty became his best friend. Every morning they jogged together. Every evening they sat on the porch watching sunsets. When Jack retired, Rusty never left his side. Then one winter morning, Jack suffered a stroke. He passed away before the ambulance arrived. There was no family nearby, no children, no relatives willing to take an elderly dog. Rusty waited by the front door for 3 days, before neighbors finally brought him to the shelter. Linda's voice grew softer. The first few months were heartbreaking. He refused to eat. He slept beside the kennel door. He waited every afternoon at exactly 4 o'clock. Emily frowned. Why 4? Linda smiled sadly. That's when Jack always came home. Noah had been listening. His small voice interrupted. He was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Linda nodded slowly. Yes. Noah looked down. So was I. The room became silent. Emily felt another tear roll down her cheek. Her little boy understood that lonely old dog better than anyone. Before leaving, Noah asked quietly, Can we come back tomorrow? Emily hesitated. She wasn't sure adopting a dog, especially an elderly, one with medical needs, was realistic. Money had been tight since Daniel passed away. Between the mortgage, school expenses, and medical bills, every dollar mattered. But she couldn't say no. Yes, Noah smiled. I promised Rusty. Linda laughed gently. I think he'll hold you to that promise. The next morning, they returned. Rusty recognized Noah immediately. His tired tail wagged 3 familiar times. The volunteers couldn't believe it. He never gets up this fast, one whispered. That day Noah read his favorite dinosaur book aloud while Rusty rested beside him. The old dog seemed fascinated by Noah's voice. Whenever Noah paused, Rusty looked up as if asking him to continue. For the first time in months, Noah laughed. A real laugh. The kind that filled the room. Emily hadn't realized how much she'd missed hearing it. The visits became a routine. Every Saturday, every Sunday, sometimes after school, Noah brought blankets. He brushed Rusty's fading coat. He even packed little homemade treats approved by Linda. Other visitors noticed. Children who had once ignored Rusty now stopped to pet him. Families smiled as they watched the unlikely friendship. One afternoon, a local reporter visiting the shelter snapped a picture. A little boy reading to an old dog. Neither looked at the camera. They only looked at each other. The picture was beautiful. A few days later, the photo appeared on the shelter's Facebook page. The caption read, "Some friendships don't need words." By morning, thousands of people had shared it. Comments poured in. "I'm crying. Someone please adopt this sweet dog. That little boy has the biggest heart. This restored my faith in humanity." Donations began arriving for the shelter. Volunteers received dozens of adoption applications. But strangely, no one asked about Rusty. They all wanted younger dogs. Healthier dogs. Dogs with many years left. Rusty remained exactly where he'd always been, at the end of the hallway, waiting. One rainy evening, Noah noticed something. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Why hasn't anyone taken Rusty home?" Emily searched for the right words. Finally, she answered honestly, "Some people are afraid." "Of what?" "They're afraid they'll lose him too soon." Noah thought quietly, "But everyone gets old." Emily nodded. "They do. So, doesn't that make old dogs the ones who need love the most?" Emily had no answer. Because her 7-year-old had just spoken a truth, many adults spent a lifetime forgetting. The following Friday, Linda called Emily. Her voice sounded different. Concerned. "I'm sorry to bother you. Is everything okay?" "It's Rusty." Emily's heart sank. "What happened?" "He stopped eating." Emily looked toward Noah, who was coloring at the kitchen table. "When?" "Since yesterday." "Can we come now?" Linda didn't hesitate. "Please." 20 minutes later, Noah ran into the shelter. Rusty was lying on his blanket. He looked weaker than ever. His eyes slowly opened when he heard familiar footsteps. "Noah." The old dog's tail moved. Once, twice, 3 times. Barely. Noah knelt beside him. "You have to eat." Rusty rested his head in Noah's lap. Linda handed Noah a small bowl of chicken and rice. "Maybe he'll eat for you." Noah scooped up a tiny spoonful. "Please, buddy." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Rusty slowly took one bite. Linda gasped. Emily smiled through tears. Another bite, then another. The volunteers quietly applauded. One whispered, "I think that little boy just saved his life." But across the room, the shelter veterinarian wasn't smiling. She studied Rusty's chart with a worried expression. There were test results no one had shared with Noah yet. Results that suggested the old dog might be facing a battle, far more serious than anyone had imagined. And before the week was over, Emily would have to make a decision that could change all of their lives forever. The shelter veterinarian, Dr. Melissa Grant, quietly motioned for Emily and Linda to step into her office. She gently closed the door behind them. Outside, Noah remained on the floor beside Rusty, softly stroking the old dog's graying fur. Inside the office, Dr. Grant placed a folder on the desk. "I'm afraid Rusty's blood work isn't good." Emily's heart sank. "How bad is it?" The veterinarian sighed. "His kidneys are beginning to fail. Combined with his arthritis and his age, he's very fragile." Emily looked down at the test results, though the numbers meant little to her. "Can he recover?" "We can manage his condition with medication, a special diet, and lots of love," but Dr. Grant paused. "We can't stop time." Silence filled the room. Linda quietly wiped away a tear. "I've known this dog for almost 4 years," she whispered. "I just wanted him to have one real home before—" She couldn't finish the sentence. That evening, the drive home felt different. Noah stared out the window. Finally, he asked the question Emily had been dreading. "Is Rusty dying?" Emily tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "He isn't dying today. But someday?" She nodded softly. "Yes." Noah was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at his mother. "So are we." Emily blinked. "What do you mean?" "Dad died. Grandpa died. People don't stop loving them because they might lose them." Emily felt tears fill her eyes. "No, then why is everyone afraid to love Rusty?" She had no answer. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Bills covered the kitchen table. Mortgage payment. electric bill, school supplies, insurance. Now she added another list: senior dog food, medication, vet visits, special bedding. The numbers simply didn't work. She buried her face in her hands. "I wish you were here," she whispered to the empty chair where Daniel used to sit. As if answering her, her eyes landed on a framed photograph. Daniel was laughing, holding a muddy golden retriever puppy they had fostered years earlier. On the back of the frame, written in Daniel's handwriting, were words she hadn't noticed in years. "The best things in life aren't the easiest. They're the ones worth choosing anyway." Emily stared at the message. Then she smiled through her tears. The next morning, Noah found her drinking coffee on the porch. "Mom?" "Yes, I know we don't have much money." Emily looked surprised. "How do you know that?" "I'm little. I'm not blind." He sat beside her. "I heard you crying last night." Emily pulled him close. "I'm sorry." "No." Noah shook his head. "I'm sorry." She frowned. "For what?" "You already lost Dad. And now I'm asking you to save Rusty too." Emily hugged him tightly. "You never have to apologize for having a kind heart." Later that afternoon, they returned to the shelter. Linda greeted them with a warm smile. "I think someone missed you." Rusty slowly stood as Noah entered. His tail wagged. 1, 2, 3. Always 3. Noah laughed. "I knew you were waiting." Rusty gently pressed his nose into Noah's hand. Emily asked Linda if they could take Rusty outside for a short walk. With a special support harness helping his weak legs, Rusty carefully followed Noah into the shelter's small garden. Butterflies fluttered between colorful flowers. Children played in a nearby park. For the first time in months, Rusty walked farther than anyone expected. Not because he suddenly felt young again, but because Noah was beside him. Every few steps, the little boy would stop and wait. "Take your time, buddy." Rusty looked up at him with complete trust. The volunteers watched from the window. One whispered, "It's like they're healing each other." As they rested beneath a large oak tree, Noah noticed something hanging from Rusty's old collar. A small silver tag. Not the shelter tag. A different one, worn nearly smooth with age. Noah carefully turned it over. On the back were engraved words, "Always wait for the ones you love." Emily felt chills. That must have been from Jack. Noah smiled. I think Rusty remembered. That evening, Emily made her decision. She filled out the adoption papers. Linda looked at her in disbelief. "Are you sure?" Emily smiled. "I'm terrified." Linda laughed through happy tears. "That's usually a good sign. I can't promise Rusty years." She looked toward Noah, who was hugging the old dog. "But I can promise him a family." The volunteers gathered in the lobby as Linda placed a blue bandana around Rusty's neck. Across it were the words, "Adopted at last." Everyone applauded. Some cried openly. One volunteer whispered, "I never thought I'd see this day." Rusty slowly walked through the shelter doors. For the first time in 418 days, he wasn't leaving for another medical appointment. He wasn't going for another temporary outing. He was finally going home. Noah held the leash proudly. As they reached the car, he opened the back door. Rusty hesitated for just a second, then climbed inside. He laid his head on Noah's lap during the drive. "Halfway home?" the little boy whispered. "You're not waiting anymore." Rusty closed his eyes peacefully. For the first time since losing Jack, he no longer looked toward the road. He had finally found someone new to come home with. But none of them knew that only a few weeks later, one unexpected act of love from Rusty would make headlines across America and prove that even an old dog with failing health could become a true hero. The first few weeks with Rusty were nothing like Emily had imagined. They were better. Every morning at exactly 6:30, Rusty slowly made his way down the hallway and sat outside Noah's bedroom door. He never barked. He simply waited. The moment Noah opened the door, Rusty's tail gave its familiar 3 gentle wags. "Good morning, buddy," Noah would say, wrapping his arms around the old dog. For the first time since Daniel's passing, Noah started getting ready for school without being asked. He smiled more. He laughed more. Even his teacher noticed. One afternoon, Mrs. Collins called Emily. "I don't know what's changed," she said, But Noah is participating in class again. He's making friends. Today he even volunteered to read in front of everyone. Emily smiled. I think I know who's responsible. She looked at Rusty, sleeping peacefully on the living room rug. Rusty wasn't a playful puppy. He couldn't chase tennis balls for long. He couldn't run through the park. But he had a gift no one could teach. He always knew when someone needed comfort. Whenever Noah felt sad, Rusty quietly rested his head on the boy's knee. Whenever Emily cried while looking through old family photos, Rusty would sit beside her without making a sound. Sometimes the greatest kind of love wasn't loud. Sometimes it simply stayed. One Saturday morning, Noah found an old baseball glove in the garage. It had belonged to his father. He carried it into the backyard. Emily watched from the kitchen window, unsure what would happen. Noah tossed a tennis ball a few feet away. Rusty slowly trotted after it. His old legs moved carefully. He picked up the ball and returned it, placing it gently into Noah's hand. Again and again. Not because he had endless energy, but because Noah was smiling. That smile was worth every aching step. Emily couldn't hold back her tears. Daniel would have loved this moment. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Their neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, an 82-year-old widow, collapsed while watering her flowers. No one saw her fall. No one, except Rusty. The old dog had been lying on the front porch. Suddenly, he stood up. He barked. Once, twice, again and again. Emily rushed outside. Rusty, what's wrong? Instead of calming down, he slowly walked toward Mrs. Jenkins' yard, stopping every few steps to make sure Emily was following. When Emily reached the fence, she gasped. Mrs. Jenkins was lying unconscious on the ground. Emily immediately called 911. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Later that evening, a paramedic returned to the Carter home. If your dog hadn't alerted you, he said, she might have been lying there for hours. Mrs. Jenkins had suffered a severe drop in blood pressure. The doctors believed Rusty's actions had saved her life. Emily knelt beside the old dog. You knew. Rusty simply rested his head against her shoulder. News traveled quickly through Cedar Ridge. The local newspaper ran a story the next morning. Senior rescue dog saves neighbor's life. The article included a photograph of Noah hugging Rusty on the front porch. By evening, the story had spread across social media. Thousands of people shared it. Comments poured in. Senior dogs deserve a chance. I'm adopting an older dog this weekend. Rusty is a true hero. Animal shelters across the state reported something incredible. People were no longer asking only for puppies. They were asking about older dogs. Dogs that had spent years waiting. Dogs everyone else had overlooked. Linda called Emily, her voice filled with excitement. You won't believe this. What happened? Since the newspaper story, 12 senior dogs have been adopted. Emily covered her mouth. 12? And people keep coming. Linda laughed through happy tears. I think Rusty started something. A week later, Cedar Ridge held its annual Community Heroes Festival. The mayor invited firefighters, teachers, nurses, and volunteers to be recognized. This year, they added one more name, Rusty. The old golden retriever slowly walked onto the stage wearing his blue bandana. The crowd stood to their feet. Hundreds of people applauded. Children cheered. Some adults wiped away tears. The mayor smiled. Today we honor a dog who reminds us that courage has no age, and love never retires. He placed a gold medal around Rusty's neck. Noah beamed with pride. That's my best friend. After the ceremony, an elderly man approached the Carter family. His name was Thomas Sullivan. Emily noticed his eyes immediately fill with tears when he saw Rusty. Excuse me, he said softly. I think I know this dog. Emily looked surprised. You do? Thomas nodded. My brother's name was Jack Sullivan. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Jack, Rusty's first owner? Thomas smiled sadly. Yes. He slowly knelt before Rusty. The old dog stared at him for a long moment. Then, his cloudy eyes widened. His tail wagged. 1, 2, 3. Thomas gently placed his hand on Rusty's head. Hello, old friend. Tears rolled down his face. I've been looking for you for years. Emily and Noah exchanged stunned glances. None of them had expected that after all this time. Someone from Rusty's past would suddenly appear, and what Thomas carried in the worn, leather envelope tucked beneath his arm would reveal a final promise Jack had made, a promise that was about to change Noah's future forever. The crowd slowly drifted away after the Community Heroes Festival. Children asked to pet Rusty. Reporters packed up their cameras. The applause faded, but Thomas Sullivan remained standing quietly in front of Noah and Emily, holding the worn leather envelope tightly against his chest. Rusty never took his eyes off him. The old dog's tail gave 3 slow wags. Thomas smiled through his tears. He remembers. Emily nodded gently. I think he does. They walked together to a nearby park bench beneath a large maple tree. For several moments, no one spoke. Finally, Thomas carefully opened the envelope. The paper inside had yellowed with age. Its edges were worn. I've carried this for almost 5 years, Thomas said softly. It was written by my brother, Jack. Emily looked surprised. You've had it all this time? Thomas nodded. When Jack passed away so suddenly, everything happened so fast. I lived overseas then. By the time I returned, Rusty had already disappeared into the shelter system. He looked down at the old dog. I searched, but I never found him. Rusty rested his head against Thomas's knee, as if the missing years had vanished. Thomas unfolded the letter carefully. My brother asked me to read this only if Rusty was ever found. His voice trembled. He began reading aloud. If you're reading this, then my best friend is still out there somewhere. Emily squeezed Noah's hand. Thomas continued. Rusty gave me hope after I lost my wife. Every lonely evening, every difficult morning, he reminded me that life was still worth living. He paused to wipe away a tear. I don't care who gives him his next home. I only hope it's someone who needs him as much as he needs them. Noah quietly leaned closer. Thomas smiled sadly before reading the final lines. If Rusty ever chooses another family, don't be jealous of them. His voice broke. Be grateful, because loving again is never a betrayal. Silence settled over the park. Emily couldn't stop crying. Neither could Thomas. Even Noah wiped his eyes. Thomas folded the letter with great care. My brother would have loved you. He looked directly at Noah. You gave Rusty exactly what Jack hoped someone would. Noah hugged the old dog tightly. I think he saved me too. Thomas smiled. I believe you're right. Over the following weeks, Thomas became part of their lives. He visited every Sunday afternoon. He told Noah stories about Jack, how Rusty had once chased squirrels into a lake, how he insisted on sleeping beside Jack's recliner every night, how he hated thunderstorms but loved snow. Noah laughed harder than he had in over a year. For the first time since losing Daniel, another fatherly voice filled the house, not replacing anyone, simply helping heal what had been broken. One evening, Thomas brought over an old wooden box. I think this belongs to Rusty. Inside were treasures from another lifetime. A faded red leash, Jack's firefighter badge, photographs of a much younger Rusty splashing in rivers and climbing mountain trails, and one worn baseball. Thomas smiled. Jack used to throw this every evening after work. Noah picked it up carefully. It still smells like leather. Rusty slowly stood, walked over, and gently nudged the ball with his nose. Everyone laughed. Even at 12 years old, he still remembered. As autumn turned into winter, Rusty's health began changing. He tired more easily. The walks became shorter. Some mornings, Noah helped him stand. Other days, Emily carried him into the backyard wrapped in a warm blanket. Yet Rusty never stopped greeting Noah before school. Every morning, 3 tail wags. Every afternoon, 3 tail wags. Every bedtime, 3 tail wags. It became their silent promise. I'm here. Just before Christmas, Noah came home carrying an envelope from school. We had to write about our hero. Emily smiled. I'd love to read it. Noah unfolded the paper. At the top, written in large, careful letters, were the words, My hero is an old dog named Rusty. He began reading aloud. My hero isn't famous. He isn't young. He can't run very fast. But when my dad went to heaven, everyone kept telling me to be brave. Rusty never told me to be brave. He just stayed beside me until I was. Emily covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Noah continued. My dad taught me how to live. Rusty taught me how to smile again. And I think heroes do both. By the time he finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Thomas quietly whispered, Jack, you would be so proud. A few days later, Noah's essay was entered into a statewide writing contest. Thousands of students participated. No one expected a second grader's story about an old shelter dog to stand out. But on New Year's Eve, a phone call arrived from the school principal. Mrs. Carter? Yes? I'm happy to tell you that Noah's essay won first place. Emily gasped. Really? Not only that, the judges want Noah to read it during the state's annual Children's Inspiration Ceremony. The event would be televised across the state. Millions of people would hear the story of a forgotten shelter dog named Rusty. But as the family celebrated the wonderful news, Rusty quietly lay beside the Christmas tree. He looked peaceful, content, almost as though he had already completed the mission he had been waiting for all along. None of them realized that before Noah stepped onto that stage, they would face the hardest goodbye of their lives. The first snow of January covered Cedar Ridge in a blanket of white. Noah woke before sunrise, excited to show Rusty the fresh snow. For months, it had become their favorite morning tradition. He hurried down the hallway. As always, Rusty was waiting outside his bedroom door. But this morning, the old dog didn't stand. He simply looked up with tired, loving eyes. His tail wagged. Once, twice, 3 times. Noah knelt beside him. You're tired today, aren't you, buddy? Rusty gently licked Noah's hand. Emily watched from the kitchen doorway. She knew. Deep in her heart. She knew. Over the next few days, Rusty ate less. He slept more. Even walking to the backyard became difficult. Dr. Melissa Grant visited the Carter home instead of asking them to bring Rusty to the clinic. After examining him, she sat quietly with Emily. His kidneys are failing faster now. Emily's voice trembled. Is he in pain? We're keeping him comfortable. Dr. Grant looked toward Rusty, who was peacefully resting with his head on Noah's feet. I don't think he's holding on because he's afraid. She smiled gently. I think he's holding on because he loves his family. That evening, Noah climbed onto the couch beside Rusty. I know what the doctor said. Emily looked at him with surprise. You heard? He nodded. I'm not little enough to miss things anymore. He wrapped a blanket around Rusty. I just wish love could make people stay forever. Emily pulled Noah close. I wish that too. Thomas visited the next afternoon. He carried Jack's old firefighter jacket. Without saying a word, he laid it gently beside Rusty's bed. The old dog slowly rested his head on it. Thomas smiled through tears. Home. Word spread quietly through the neighborhood. People whose lives Rusty had touched began stopping by. Mrs. Jenkins baked cookies for Noah. The mail carrier brought Rusty's favorite treats. Children from the park left handmade cards on the front porch. One card simply read, Thank you for being everyone's good boy. Another said, Old dogs are forever heroes. Emily saved every single one. A week before the Children's Inspiration Ceremony, Noah canceled his speech rehearsal. I don't want to leave Rusty. Emily understood. So did the organizers. To everyone's surprise, they offered to move the rehearsal to the Carter home. That afternoon, teachers, volunteers, and organizers gathered quietly in the living room. Noah stood beside Rusty's bed. He unfolded his speech. Every few paragraphs, he looked down at his best friend. Rusty's eyes never left him. When Noah reached the final line, heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wag their tails. Everyone applauded softly. Rusty's tail moved. Once, twice, 3 times. Even now, he was cheering for Noah. That night, snow began falling again. The house was peaceful. Emily sat beside Rusty, gently stroking his fur. Thomas quietly read one of Jack's favorite books aloud. Noah held Rusty's paw. No one wanted to sleep. Around midnight, Rusty slowly lifted his head. He looked first at Thomas, then at Emily. Finally, at Noah. His cloudy eyes were calm, peaceful, grateful. Noah leaned close and whispered through tears, "You don't have to wait anymore." Rusty gave one final gentle lick to Noah's hand. Then, his tail wagged. Once, twice, 3 times. With a long, quiet sigh, he closed his eyes and peacefully slipped away. The room remained completely silent. Emily hugged Noah tightly as they both cried. Thomas rested one hand on Jack's old jacket and whispered, "My brother's waiting for you now." Outside, snow continued falling, covering the world in white. It felt as though heaven itself had paused to honor one old golden retriever who had spent his life loving others. A few days later, nearly the entire town gathered for Rusty's memorial in Cedar Ridge Park. Firefighters stood beside shelter volunteers. Teachers stood beside veterinarians. Families who had adopted senior dogs because of Rusty's story came from neighboring towns. Linda placed Rusty's blue bandana on a wooden memorial table. The words still read, "Adopted at last." Noah stepped forward carrying Rusty's favorite baseball. He placed it beside the bandana. Then he looked at the crowd. "My dad taught me that heroes help people." He smiled through his tears. "Rusty taught me that heroes also heal hearts." There wasn't a dry eye in the park. But Rusty's greatest gift was still waiting to be revealed. Just days later, when Noah stepped onto the stage to read his award-winning essay, one unexpected announcement would ensure that Rusty's love and his legacy would live on for generations. The morning of the children's inspiration. Ceremony arrived with bright winter sunshine. For the first time in weeks, Noah walked into the school auditorium without Rusty beside him. The silence felt different. His hand still reached toward where the old golden retriever would have been. Then he remembered. Emily gently squeezed his shoulder. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready." Noah looked at the folded speech in his hands. Then he smiled softly. "I think Rusty would want me to." The state auditorium was filled with nearly 2,000 people. Teachers, parents, students, veterans, firefighters, animal rescue volunteers. Television cameras quietly rolled as the ceremony began. When Noah's name was announced, the audience applauded warmly. The 7-year-old walked slowly to the microphone. He took a deep breath. Then he unfolded his paper. "My hero wasn't famous," he began. "He didn't have millions of followers. He never won a championship. He never became rich. My hero was an old shelter dog named Rusty." The room became completely silent. Noah told the story of meeting Rusty. How everyone walked past the oldest dog in the shelter. How Rusty had waited more than 400 days for someone to notice him. How he had comforted a little boy whose heart had been broken after losing his father. People quietly wiped away tears. Even the television crew lowered their cameras for a moment. Noah continued. "Everyone thought we rescued Rusty." He looked up from the page. "They were wrong. He rescued us." The audience erupted into applause. When Noah finished speaking, every person in the auditorium stood. A standing ovation lasted nearly 3 full minutes. Emily cried openly. Thomas wiped away tears. Linda hugged the shelter volunteers. No one had expected a 7-year-old's speech to touch so many hearts. Then the governor stepped onto the stage. "I have one more announcement." The room grew quiet again. Because of Rusty's extraordinary story, our state is launching a new program, encouraging the adoption of senior shelter animals. The giant screen behind him lit up with Rusty's smiling photograph. Across the top were the words, "The Rusty Project." Its mission was simple. Every senior pet deserves one last loving home. The audience burst into applause once more. Noah looked at Rusty's picture and whispered, "You did it, buddy!" The impact was immediate. Shelters across the state reported record numbers of senior dog adoptions. Families who had never considered older pets began asking for them by name. Television stations replayed Noah's speech. Newspapers called Rusty the dog who changed how America sees senior pets. Donations poured into animal rescues from every corner of the country. One shelter director said, "We've never seen anything like this." A month later, Emily received an unexpected letter. It came from a woman in Oregon. Inside was a photograph of an elderly beagle sleeping beside a little girl. The letter read, Because of Rusty's story, we adopted Daisy instead of buying a puppy. Our daughter had been struggling with anxiety after losing her grandmother. Now she smiles every day. Please tell Noah that one old dog changed another family's life. It wasn't the last letter. Hundreds arrived, then thousands. Some came from New York, others from Texas, Florida, Michigan, California. Each told the same story. An older dog, a lonely family, a second chance. Spring arrived. One Saturday, Noah and Emily visited Cedar Ridge Animal Rescue. Linda greeted them with a huge smile. "I have something to show you." She led them to the very last kennel, the one that had once belonged to Rusty. It was empty. Above the door hung a new wooden sign. Rusty's Corner. Instead of housing forgotten dogs, it became a special place where senior pets waited only a short time before finding homes. The waiting list had disappeared. Linda smiled proudly. "We haven't had a senior dog stay here longer than 2 weeks since." Rusty's story, Emily couldn't believe it. Noah gently touched the sign. I knew he'd keep helping. Before leaving, Noah noticed a frightened 13-year-old black Labrador lying quietly in the corner of another kennel. Just like Rusty had done. The dog didn't bark, didn't jump, didn't beg. He simply watched people walk by. Noah slowly knelt. "Hi." The old Labrador looked up. His tail moved. Once, twice, 3 times. Emily smiled. She knew that look. Linda laughed softly. I had a feeling that might happen. Noah looked at his mother. She already knew what he was about to ask. Emily smiled through happy tears. "I guess our family still has room for one more." The shelter volunteers burst into applause. Rusty's story was beginning all over again. But one final surprise, waiting exactly 1 year later, would leave the entire town in tears and prove that love never truly says goodbye. 1 year later, the morning sun bathed Cedar Ridge in a warm golden glow. The town looked different now. Outside the animal shelter, colorful banners fluttered in the breeze. Children laughed as families gathered with dogs of every age and size. What had once been an ordinary Saturday had become an annual tradition. It was called Rusty Day. Every year, the community came together to celebrate senior rescue, animals, and the families who had given them a second chance. Noah, now 8 years old, stood beside his mother and Thomas. At his feet sat their newest family member, a gentle black Labrador named Charlie. Like Rusty before him, Charlie was an older shelter dog. And just like Rusty, his tail wagged 3 times whenever Noah smiled. Linda stepped onto the small stage set up in front of the shelter. She looked across the crowd, smiling through tears. When Rusty arrived here, we worried he might spend the rest of his life alone. She paused. Instead, he changed thousands of lives. The audience applauded. Behind Linda, a giant screen displayed photographs. Rusty lying beside Noah while he read books. Rusty wearing his adopted at last bandana. Rusty receiving his community hero medal. Rusty resting peacefully beneath the maple tree with Jack's old firefighter jacket. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Then Linda shared something no one expected. Since the Rusty Project began, she smiled proudly. More than 12,000 senior dogs have been adopted across our state. The audience erupted into cheers. Animal shelters that once struggled to find homes for elderly pets now celebrated empty senior kennels. Families who had never imagined adopting an older dog had discovered that love isn't measured by years, it's measured by moments. Rusty's story had become a movement. Next, Thomas walked onto the stage carrying the same worn leather envelope that had once held Jack's letter. I have one final gift, he said. This belonged to my brother. He opened a small velvet box. Inside was Jack Sullivan's old firefighter service medal. Thomas turned toward Noah. My brother always believed heroes deserved to be remembered. He gently placed the medal into Noah's hands. I can't think of anyone who will protect Rusty's story better than you. Noah held the medal tightly. I promise. Later that afternoon, the Carter family walked to the quiet hill overlooking Cedar Ridge. At the top stood a simple stone surrounded by wildflowers. It read, Rusty, a loyal friend. A gentle hero, loved forever. Noah knelt and placed Rusty's favorite baseball beside the stone. Charlie lay quietly next to him. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Noah smiled. "You know, Mom." "What is it?" "I used to think losing someone meant they were gone." Emily brushed a tear from her cheek. "And now?" Noah looked toward the sky. "I think people and dogs stay with us every time we choose kindness because of them." Thomas nodded quietly. "That's exactly right." As they prepared to leave, Noah noticed a young family walking toward the shelter. A little girl, no older than 6, held her father's hand. Instead of running toward the puppies, she stopped in front of an elderly dog with gray around his muzzle. The old dog slowly stood. His tail wagged. Once, twice, 3 times. The little girl smiled. "I want to meet him." Emily looked at Noah. No words were needed. Rusty's story was still being written. One family at a time. That evening, Noah opened the journal his father had once given him. On the final page, he wrote, "Dear Rusty, thank you for teaching me that love isn't about how long we have someone. It's about making every single day matter. You came into our lives when we were broken. You left us stronger than we ever thought we could be. I'll keep telling your story for the rest of my life. Love, your best friend Noah." He closed the journal and smiled. Outside the window, Charlie rested peacefully on the porch, watching the sunset. For just a second, Noah could have sworn he saw another golden shape sitting beside him. Calm, proud, watching over the family he had healed. Whether it was memory, imagination, or simply love, it filled Noah's heart with peace. Because some friendships never really end, they simply become part of who we are. And every time an older dog finds a warm bed, a gentle hand, or a family willing to love despite the ticking clock, Rusty's legacy lives on. The end. If Rusty's story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share this video with someone who loves animals, and leave a comment telling us, would you adopt a senior dog? Your support helps bring more heartwarming stories like this to life. Thank you for watching.